In this video, we'll be finding out exactly how fast a tyre can be. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you might think I've already done this test. Well, you're right, I have, but I did it on a street car. This time I've upgraded, I've gone one better. In fact, I've gone many things better. This time we are using an actual race car, an M4 GT4. And I'm working with the Hoosier brand. Now, if you don't know Hoosier, where have you been? They're kind of Continental's racing brand. They're one of the fastest slick manufacturers in the market. And they make this. This is the tire that if you've been in any sort of motorsport, you will probably know about. This is the Hoosier R7. This is technically road legal thanks to these circumferential grooves, but the road legality of this is more a technicality that goes back to the history of spec motorsport in the US. But this is one of the fastest tires on the market you can buy that isn't a full slick. It does have a slightly faster brother, the A7, but for this test we're concentrating on the R7 because it's more of an endurance tire, whereas the A7 is more aimed at autocross, and we're going to be doing multiple laps. Knowing this is one of the fastest tires on the market, the slick has a lot of work to do. So we've got one of the Hoosier Medium Compound Slicks. Now this slick, this is not a spec slick designed for endurance racing, for people that want a slick to last all season. This is a proper race slick, so this is going to be super fast. And if the information I've been told is correct, this Hoosier Medium Slick is one of the fastest slicks on the market. It's one of the class-leading products. So this will be a huge benchmark to see just how much extra grip you get changing compound slightly and removing this circumferential groove for road legality. Finally, the astute of you will have noticed that there's a rather unique looking tire to my right, your left. This is the new Hoosier TrackAttack Pro, and I guess this is the big news of the video. This is Hoosier's entry into a proper streetable tire. This is a 200 treadwear category tire that's designed slightly differently from some of its competitors. This is up to Y speed rating. This isn't some of the big sizes. This is going after that Cup 2R segment, streetable track tire. So the tire you can put on your 911 GT3, drive to the track no problem, have an amazing track day, and then drive home. This technically is road legal. You can drive this to the track, but Hoosier and all the resellers say don't actually do that. Obviously in a rainstorm, you're gonna come a cropper. There's no water evacuation whatsoever. But this is gonna be the really interesting product, because Hoosier, they're a racing brand. They make some of the fastest tires in the world, and their entry into the 200 treadwear segment is big news. So, I don't know how I've ended up in the position, but I get to drive one of these on these three tires and tell you my subjective feelings and which is fastest. So, let's get on with the testing. Okay, first things first. If you have money, come to the BMW driving school. Google it, I'll link it in the description. You can pay money to drive a GT4, which is the best use you can do of money. Honestly, sell a pet, sell a child, do what you need to do to get some time in one of these cars. They're incredible. I started the day on the Hoosier R7, the street legal slick, and it is everything I've ever wanted from a tire. It is direct, it is grippy, it is fast, it gives you some ability to correct. It's just, it's so strong on the brakes. This car with its aero and the Hoosier R7, you have to put so much pressure in the unassisted brakes. It feels like you're going to push the pedal through the floor, but the car stops. I'm excited to see the G meters and everything like that. We'll go into the data after this. But the R7 was just a freaking awesome experience. I'm driving on it now. As you can see, it's playful, it's fun. We're sideways, it's just absolutely no problem. Its fastest lap, I did like a fresh out of the box flyer at a 104.5, I think, and then it stabilized in about the mid 105s. I moved to the slick after that, went from the R7 to the slick. And let me tell you, the slick, if this was a competitor subject tire test and I was scoring them, they would essentially get the same score subjectively, because the slick just felt every bit as good as the R7. Where it was different, the slick allowed you to get on the brakes just a little bit later, trail in a little bit more. It was just a little bit more stable in terms of subjective handling. In terms of lap times, it sat at a 104 flat and then just sat there. It didn't seem to heat out as much as the R7. It seemed to manage to heat a little bit better.
And I think, for fairness, we always do tyre tests at the same test. So we're running these, we're setting them all to like about 22 cold, and then we're getting to around 30 hot. And I think that might have been a little bit high for the slick. And also this is a short track, and there's a lot of slow speed corners where you're not really leaning on the slick fully laterally. So I expect at a different circuit, the slick would have more than a half-second ultimate advantage. But let's face it, that R7 is essentially a slick for the road. So moving to the TrackAttack Pro, you would forgive this tyre to be completely outclassed, because this is a street tyre in a class or in a test with what is essentially a slick, the R7, and what is actually a slick. And it wasn't. It felt every bit as much as the R7, minus maybe 3%. But where you lost the 3% in ultimate grip, what you got back was a little bit more progressivity. Not that the R7's a difficult tyre to drive. The R7's fully alive all of the time, and so is the TrackAttack, which, I mean, I'm so excited to try this against competitors. But the TrackAttack just allowed the slide to be a little bit more progressive. There was a little bit more movement around the limit. You just had, I think, a little bit less ultimate traction when braking and turning, especially feathering into the corners. But let's not forget, this is a street tyre, and I'm running it on a GT4. I tell you what, I'm pretty sure in the 200 treadwear category, there is not a lot of tyres that will get close to an R7. And Hoosier say, and they're very sure, that even the fabled Cup 2R will not get to an R217 on lap time. So what did the TrackAttack do? Did it get close? Well, its ultimate lap time was only half a second slower than the R7. Half a second. And then it stabilised like the R7. It lost a bit of time with heat, and then it stabilised. Let me tell you, as of now, the TrackAttack, it might be the new king of 200s. I will be testing this very, very soon. But I tell you, tell me another 200 that can get close to an R7 over more than one lap, because I know there's some products on the market that will get close to an R7 over the first lap, but they don't feel like a race tyre. They feel like a very sticky, soft tyre. The TrackAttack feels like a race tyre, and it's doing essentially race tyre speeds. And it's a super enjoyable, fun tyre to drive. What an experience. This is, like I said, this M4 GT4 is probably the best car I've ever driven. It's a full-on race car, and the Hoosier tyres match it so well. But let's dig into the data and look at all the nuances of the lap times.
3 awesome tyres, and what a fabulous experience. Now, as promised, I did dig into the data, and as expected, I have sold the slick a little bit short. I was told just before going out on the slick by a friendly mechanic, just trying to give me a friendly warning, the slick needs more warm-up. And because the track we were using has barriers very close to some of the high-speed corners, and I didn't want to put a brand new BMW GT4 that no one at the driving school had driven yet into a barrier and wreck it. I was very, very careful, so I did a bunch of extra warm-up laps on the slick. So I missed that excellent peaky first lap, the highest grip point you ever get from a tyre. Brand new tyre when it's warmed up, and you just go for it on like lap 3 or 4. I missed that on the slick, whereas I didn't on the other 2, so that cost it some time. Plus, the track we were using at Thermal doesn't have a huge amount of high-speed braking points or very long high-speed corners where the slick would have pulled out an even bigger advantage. So that kind of hampered the slick, those 2 reasons. So I expect the gaps. In fact, if I was guessing, I would say the R7 would be a peak around a mid-64, and then it stabilized around a mid-65. The slick would peak at about a low 63, a very low 63, which I didn't achieve, and then stabilize around a low 64, which I was hammering on afterwards, no problem. And the TrackAttack would probably peak around a high 64, so not that far behind the R7, about half a second, maybe just under half a second, but then it stabilizes a kind of low to mid 66. That is interesting. It's most likely because just by the virtue of having more grooves, you have less compound, and that means the compound has less thermal capacity to take that heat that you're building when driving really quickly. But that's, again, that's not a negative of the compound. I think it's just the nature of the fact this tyre has some water dispersion, as it's meant to be more streetable than and this isn't even a street tire. It is legally a street tire, as I said in the introduction, but you're probably not going to street it. So the two big questions I'm left with from this test is, one, how does this compare to the other 200s? Does this have the pace and endurability of the very best of the segment? I think one of the fastest is the Yokohama A052, but that is very, very peaky for one lap and then falls off very quickly in my small experience with it. And then you have the Bridgestone Potenza RE71RS, which is very, very fast and a little bit more stable. Hoosier think this will be faster than both, no problem. I am going to find out with the Tyre Reviews M3 at the start of next year. If you can't wait that long, I'm pretty certain Andy from Grassroots Motorsport has a set of these and he'll be doing a test himself for that magazine and website. So keep an eye on that publication if you're really keen to know. But I think this is, from what I understand about the base of this tyre, I think this has a very, very good chance of being the new fastest 200. One small quirk with it is the tread depth of the tyre is a little bit too low for a lot of the club racing in the US. Not sure why Hoosier have done that, but I'm sure there's a good reason. But that does mean it will be excluded from some of the events you might be attending. So make sure you look up the legality of this tyre before buying it and assuming you can run it, because it has a 200 on the sidewall. The other big question, the one I'm even more excited about answering, but might take me a little bit longer, is their claim that this is now a Cup 2R rival on a car like the GT3 RS, a 911 GT3 RS. If it can rival an OE Porsche Michelin-derived Cup 2R or the new Pirelli P0 Trofeo RS, because we know that's now knocking the Cup 2R around a little bit, while not being an OE product, that would make this tyre completely bonkers. That would make it the fastest streetable tyre in the world without any doubt. If you know anyone at Porsche in the US that will lend me a GT3 RS to do this test, please do get in touch. I had contacts in Europe, but I'm having a little bit of trouble in the US. So that test will happen as soon as I have the car and a few sets of wheels, because obviously you need those as well. And I'm not entirely sure Porsche will be on board with it, because if it does show that their OE product is slower, that's not ideal for anyone involved. So maybe I'll work out a way. Perhaps if you've got a GT3 RS you'd like to lend me and you live somewhere around Utah, come over to UMC and we'll do the test together. It'll be a lot of fun. Anyway, thank you so much for watching if you've got this far. As always, any comments, please do leave them below, or any questions. There is a community around tyres growing on Reddit. I'll leave that linked in the description if you're a proper tyre nerd. The Tyre Reviews website powers this YouTube channel. So if you can go and review your tyres on tyrereviews.com, it just helps me more than you understand. And it doesn't cost you anything. And it doesn't have to be a product as extreme as any of these. It can be just your regular street tyre. It really helps me. And as always, safe motoring.